Hey guys, welcome back to the Bass Tutor. My name is Tyler Fry, and I'm the Bass Tutor. So guys, as you can tell, we're back in the tackle room, and that is a very exciting thing, because what that means is today is the very first video of the Beginner Bassing series. If you watched last week's video, I told you a little bit about what to expect, but today is going to be the first video of the Beginner Bassing series. And so I've had this plan since I began making the YouTube channel, and I've been looking forward to making it. But I wanted to make sure that I had the videos lined up and ready to go for you all. So if you are a guy who's been fishing for years and you're thinking, hey, I'm not going to watch this, I don't want to, whatever. That's completely fine. It's up to you. There's always some tips that may help you out. But if you won't watch the video, do me one favor and show this video to somebody that's just getting into the sport so we can help it grow and flourish. So guys, without further ado, the first thing I'm going to teach you about bass fishing is how to spool up one of these guys right here, a bait casting reel. So the one I have right here, this is a Lews Tournament MB, and they actually, I don't know if they're doing away with them or what they're doing there, but this is the reel I'm going to show you to do it on. Now, you can use any reel out there that you want to use. This one right here was actually my first reel, and that is a Garcia SilverMax. And then the reel before that I learned on was this old Quantum Light. This thing is a really old reel, but that's what I started fishing with when I was really young. That was the first baitcaster my dad ever gave me and let me use, and that's what I learned on until I got this SilverMax and I started using it. So, what we're going to do, I'm going to teach you how to put backing on a reel first. So I'm going to go ahead and put the camera over here, and I'm going to show you how it's done. So let's jump on into it. Alright guys, so now we got the camera pulled on in, and now I'm going to show you how to spool this up. So what I do is, this is how I spool up my bait casters. And so some people may do it a little different, but this is how I'm going to teach you to do it. So what I have here is, this is some 4-pound Zebco Omniflex. This line right here, it's super cheap. You can buy it at Walmart. It's just a really super cheap line, and that's what I use for my backing. Now, I'm going to tag or link some down below so you all can pick some line up. It may not be Zebco Omniflex, but it'll be a cheap line that it's not going to matter if you use it as backing. So, as you can tell, this right here is 4-pound test. Now, I'm never going to use 4-pound test on my bait casters except for when I'm using it as backing. So typically, what a bait caster is in bass fishing is, it's going to be a reel that you're going to use heavier lures on. So the lowest I'll ever go on a bait caster is 8-pound test, and that is for super small jerk baits in the wintertime. The highest I go on a bait caster personally is 20-pound fluorocarbon, and then about 65-pound braid. Now, there are people who go above it, and there are people who stay a lot below it. So it's completely up to you. Typically, my sweet spot is about 15-pound test. But since it's summertime, and I'm fishing a lot of heavier lures and looking for those giant bass, I'm going to spool mine up today with Seaguar Inviz X 20-pound line. But besides the point, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Zebco Omniflex right here, the 4-pound line, and the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to run it through the first guide on my rod back here. You can run it through all the guides if you want, but to keep it closer to the reel, I'm going to run it through that first guide right there so you all can see what I'm doing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it through this line guide right here. And what this line guide does is it places the line on the spool level so you don't have a lot of issues. So I'm going to make sure my line's straight, and I'm going to place it right through that hole. So you can see it goes right through there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it, now a lot of reels are different. So this one actually has holes in it. So I'm going to run it through these holes. Right through here. You just want to run it through one or two of them. It doesn't matter. You want to come out one side, or go through one side and come out the other. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to tie a knot on it. Alright. So now that we got it through there, we're actually going to just go ahead and tie a couple of overhand knots. So if a fish ever gets back here to this point, you're going to have a lot bigger problems anyway. So it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of people are going to use tape to hold that down. A lot of people are going to do a lot of different things. I just tie about 2 overhand knots and it's good. And if you don't have the holes in your reel, then you can just tie it around the spool. You can go through one side and just tie it around the spool, and it'll do the same exact thing, so it's no big issue. So I got a simple overhand knot, and I'm going to cut this tag in just about as close as I can right there. Alright, so now this part right here is crucial. So pull this line right here straight. Don't pull it hard or it'll break that little knot. Now we're going to start turning this handle. And you can see I'm going to take this reel and I'm going to hold it. Adjust the camera. I'm going to hold this reel right like so. And I'm going to hold on this line up here. What that's going to do is that's going to keep tension on this thing so my line goes on straight. So I'm going to hold that and I'm just going to start reeling it. That's going to keep any knots from getting in there, any loops, anything like that. So I'm just going to hold that pressure on there. Now you're not going to fill the whole spool up with this line right here. You're just going to go until it gets to about 1/4 of the way. Yeah, probably about 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward past this, and I'll see you guys in just a second. Alright guys, so now you can see that I've got this spool a little over 1/4 of the way filled up with this 4-pound test line. And something I forgot to mention a minute ago that I know a lot of people are going to bring up is they're going to say, why do you use 4-pound test backing? That's a super small line, and if a fish ever gets to my backing, won't it break it? So the reason I use 4-pound test is 4-pound test is a super light line, and it's going to keep this spool extremely light. So I'm going to be able to get super far cast because I'm using this 4-pound test line. And another question that's probably going to come up is, why do you use backing on your bait casters? The reason we do this is because right here I'm using Seaguar Fluorocarbon. Seaguar Fluorocarbon is super expensive line. And I'll do it even if I'm using Braid. This right here is Suffix 832. This stuff ain't super high, but it isn't cheap either. So I use backing on there because you're not going to cast out a whole reel full of this line right here. You'll never make a cast that far. So using this backer allows us to get more reels spooled out of one spool of line. So if that makes sense. If not, I'll try to clarify it in the description. But that's the reason that I use backer. And so, now that we have that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to tie a quick little knot. And it's going to help us connect our fluorocarbon to this monofilament line. So this is going to be a little tough if you just started out, but you'll get it. It's not crucial to be exactly perfect. Like I said, if a fish ever gets to your backer, you're going to have bigger problems anyway because that's some light line. So now what I'm going to do, now that I've got these lines, is I'm going to teach you how to tie a quick variation of what's known as an Alberto knot. And what an Alberto knot is a knot that you use to connect braid to fluorocarbon or braid to monofilament. So what we have here is fluorocarbon to monofilament, but it holds pretty good, and it's not going to be extremely detrimental that it's perfect. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take your smaller line, which is your 4-pound test, and I'll usually keep it in my left hand. So I'm going to let some line out right here, and I'm going to keep this monofilament in my left hand. Now I'm going to make a loop with it. You can tell I've just made a tiny loop right there. Then I'm going to take my fluorocarbon and I'm going to run it through that monofilament loop. So you see all I've done is I've run it through there. And I'm going to pull out a little bit of slack. Now I'm going to take this fluorocarbon and I'm going to wrap it 5 times around the 2 lines that I've made at this loop. So with the regular Alberto knot, whenever it comes to braid to fluorocarbon, you're going to do a lot more than 5. but we want this knot to be small inside of our reel. So this right here is just a backup plan. This is worst case scenario, something happens. So now that we've wrapped it down 5 times, we're going to wrap it up 5 times. So you can see my line's wrapped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it right there. I'm going to pinch that, and then I'm going to start spinning it back up 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what we're going to do is we want to come out with our line the same way we went in. So you can see that the line went in that way. So we want this line right here, this fluorocarbon, to come out this loop going toward the camera. So it's going to come out just like so, and it'll look something like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wet it, and I'm pulling it tight. Now you don't want to pull it all the way tight. So normally if you were tying an Alberto knot, you would pull it tight and it would make a little knot that comes to about right there. But since I'm leaving this in my reel, I want this to be as thin as possible. And I've never had this happen, but my theory is if a fish was to ever get down that far, as it began pulling, it would pull the knot tight. So I just leave my knot like this. It's kind of loose, but it's not so loose that my line's going to slip if I was to cast out my back end line. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut off these tag ends. And I usually make mine fairly small on this one knot. Now normally on my regular knots I don't make them this small. But since this is going to be inside my reel, I want these knots to be fairly small and these tag ends to be short. So I'm going to cut them pretty short. Not too bad, but pretty short. You can see there's about probably 1/8 of an inch right there, if that. And so it's going to look something like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reel that into our spool. And it's going to just slide right through your guide, and it's going to go right in our reel. There it is, right there. So I usually like to kind of mess around with it. You can pull it back out a little bit, and I like for it to go in dead center. So you can see right there, that's pretty close to dead center. That's where I want it. And so now we're going to put on our fluorocarbon. So we've got our backer connected to our fluorocarbon. Now we're going to be able to just go ahead and spool up the fluorocarbon line. So now I'm going to show you how to do that. So when it comes to fluorocarbon line, you don't want to spool your line off like this. If it's coming off like this, that's not good. Because what that does, you can see it leaves those coils in that line. And that's going to cause you to have a lot more backlashes and a lot more problems. So what you want is you want the line coming off the spool toward you. You want the line coming over top. Okay, so you can see right there the line's coming off the top of the spool. So what you can do, you can have somebody come out from you and they can hold this spool out here. You can run a pencil through it. Or what you can do is you can kind of just let it sit like that, and you can hold tension on it, and you can reel it like this with your hand. Now that might be a little challenging if you're just starting, but you'll get the hang of it pretty quick. So you can kind of do that. Just make absolute sure that you're keeping tension on this line. You want it to be super tight as you're putting it on the spool. So I'm going to get this thing filled up, and then I'll get right back with you.
One eternity later.
Alright guys, so now I've been filling this reel up, and so you can see it's pretty close to the edge, but it's not all the way there. You can see there's a pretty good little groove there. I like for there to be about 1/4 inch right there. What's going to happen is if you get this thing super full and you get it way up toward the top, you're going to backlash an absolute ton. So you don't want it to be super close. I leave mine about 1/4 inch away. So you can see that's right there, that's about where I leave mine at. That gives me a good thumb to be able to hold the spool as it's going, but it gives me enough room to hit my button and hold it, and you know, everything's good there. So now what I'll do, I'll go ahead and cut that off, and now your reel's spooled up. So what you'll do, Real quick tip for you if you're just getting started, something that I did more times than not. If you've got your line and you got to pull it through your guides, make sure you tighten up this spool tensioner. Your spool tensioner is this little button right here on the side. Tighten that up. It goes forward to tighten it up. You want to make sure that thing is decently tight, because if you don't, what you'll do, I'll show you what happens when it's loose. You'll go to pull your line, you'll pull it, and then there it goes. It loops up, you've backlashed, and you haven't even got started yet. So what you'll do is you will tighten the spool tensioner up, and that way whenever you go to pull it through your guides, you're not going to backlash before you're even able to get out on the water. So we'll go ahead, we'll run it through these guides. Then you've got that tied on, and then you're able to tie on just whatever bait you want. So say we're going to tie on this little punching rig. You'll just put it through there. Tie on your lure. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something about how to spool up a baitcaster. And just keep in mind, I wanted to point this out before we finish the video. In today's video, I used Seaguar Inviz X. Seaguar Inviz X is a super high-end line. So if you're not used to fishing a baitcaster, I wouldn't recommend buying Seaguar Inviz X right out of the gate. Because the point blank truth about the matter is, if you're just starting out using a baitcaster, you're going to backlash. Guys, everybody backlashes. The king of bass fishing, Kevin Van Dam, he backlashes. Every person that bass fishes backlashes, and if they tell you they don't, they're either a liar or they suck at fishing. That's just the cold hard truth. I mean, you know, that's just the way it is. Everybody's going to backlash. Everybody's going to have those days. And so next week, we're going to have the first video on how to cast a baitcaster. And so, with that being said, if you decide to go out and you decide to start fishing a baitcaster before you see that video, I want to give you one tip. And that's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of line. So, when you backlash, you're going to have a tendency to want to just start yanking on your line. Don't do that, okay? What that's going to do is that line is going to start digging down into that spool. You can see if I start pulling in, you can see that line starts digging down into that other part of the spool. So what that's going to do, later on in the day, you're going to get your backlash out, you're going to be fine, you're going to think all is good. But in there's going to be a little fray that's going to be about that big. And what's going to happen is you're going to be fishing along, you're going to have the biggest fish of the day bite probably, if your luck is anything like mine. You're going to set the hook, and that one little fray is going to snap just because it dug down and rubbed against that other piece of line. So what you do, if you have a backlash, take your time with it. Be patient, okay? This is a learning skill. It's not easy to do. Not everybody can do it. If everybody could do it, everybody would use baitcasters. So you're taking on a new task that's going to make you a lot better angler, but you have to learn to be patient in that process. So what I want you to do, if you backlash, and it's going to happen, I'm going to purposefully backlash right here and kind of show you what I'm talking about. So you can see I just tangled that thing up real good. Instead of just starting yanking and yanking and yanking and pulling, I want you to take your time and just start pulling real slow, like just like that. Don't start pulling and pulling and pulling and everything get all messed up. See right there? That's where my backlash is. Okay, I'm pulling. Don't start yanking once you get to that point. What you're going to do, you're going to move the spool back, and you're going to see a ton of little loops right there. Just gently, I'm talking ever so gently, start kind of picking through these loops. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to free up some of this line so you're able to keep pulling it, and you'll get to the next one. and then you'll get it pulled out, and then you'll get to the next one. It sounds like a tedious process, but trust me, it's going to save you a ton of time and a ton of money in the future. Because once you start pulling and yanking and breaking line and spending all this money, you're going to get mad, you're going to put the Baitcaster up, and you'll never touch it again. So what I want you to do is just be patient with this process, guys. It's going to take some time. And there is going to be some backlashes where it'll be better for you to just cut the line out and restart. But a lot of times, if you just sit down and be patient with it, then you can get them out. So down in the description below, I'm going to tag you, or I'm going to link some line up for you guys that are just getting started. It's not super expensive, but it's quality line. So you're going to be able to horse those fish in. You're going to be able to get them all in, but you're not going to have to spend $20 or $30 a spool. Now later on, you may want to start spending more money on line, and that's understandable, because that line, it's not the best stuff on the market, but for the price, it is the best stuff, the few lines that I'll tag down below. So just keep that in mind. Don't go out and spend a ton of money on line when you're first getting started with a Baitcaster, because it'll just be more of a headache than it's worth. So you can see right there, I've just been kind of picking through these loops. I just pull them back. I assess what's going on. See, you can see there's loops holding me right there. I pull them back out. I pull it back the way that it come. And that, see what it led me to? It led me to that. So now that I know that that's there, I'm able to get it out. And then I can start pulling on this line real slow, and it come right out. So you can tell right there, that was a pretty bad backlash that I put in that thing right there. Okay, so now it's almost out. I've almost got that thing out. And once I get that out, I'm going to give you one more quick tip that I just thought of that's going to save you a lot of time and headache. So you can see right there, Patience got that thing out right there. So now what I'm going to teach you, whenever you start spooling this line on, what's going to happen is all that line is going to start coming up at the same time. It's all going to start coming up together. It's going to come up in big loops and knots and balls. And once it does that, it's going to tangle up and it's going to get little knots in it. And you're going to want to take those knots and you're going to go and pull it. Once you pull it, that frays the line just like it did if you pushed it down in there. So what you're going to do, you're not going to pull that out. You're going to take your time, and if there's a little loop about like that, what you'll do is you'll just take the line, you'll kind of pull it through, and it'll be all good. So whenever you're putting this line back in, just like whenever you were spooling it up, hold the line right up through here, reel it tight, keep it tight. See, there was some of those loops, but they just fell right out. That's good. That's what you want to happen. Keep watching, and there'll be more, I'd say. So I'm looking at a bunch of them in the floor right now. See, there was some, they just fell right out. See, right there is one of the loops that I'm talking about. That's a pretty good one. You don't want that. So what I'm doing, I'm just gently pulling. And if I see it starting to create a knot, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, and I'm going to assess what's going on, and I'm going to pull it back out gently. Luckily, with this one right here, it just pulled right out. See, now we've got little loops that are going to create a knot. So I'm going to be real gentle. I'm going to pull that out. And there it went, just like that. So all my loops are out. I'm going to keep it tight. I'm going to finish reeling up the rest of it. Oh, see, there went one right there. But it just fell right out. Real slow like, pulled it. It's good to go. That line didn't fray. We're going real slow. And there we go. We got back to our bait now. So just like that, guys, you can get a backlash out, you can get the loops out, you can save yourself a lot of time and money. I know it kind of sounds like a headache when you're watching it, but trust me, it's even more of a headache whenever you're at Bass Pro Shops or Walmart constantly buying line. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something. And like I said earlier in the video, if you done knew how to do this, please share this video with someone who doesn't. Help them out, help them to learn. Make sure to share this with your friends and your family, your dog, your cousin, your preacher. I don't care who you share it with. Just make sure that we teach the world how to fish. So guys, I hope you enjoy, and make sure that you're able to get out there and wet a line. We'll see you guys later.